And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go on a Tuesday night here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Thanks for making us a part of your evening. We are live wherever and however you may be watching and listening on Roku, iHeartRadio, and all social media platforms known to man. What is going on, everybody? Appreciate you all for joining us. Of course, for our good folks here on our live stream as well. Like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell button. Keep you up to date on future and past episodes. I'm really excited about this one. I think it's going to be really interesting. We got Olympics currently going on. Football is finally upon us. Training camps have been amazing. And we've also got our Hall of Fame game with the Bears playing against the Texans. And I'm excited about this one. But there's a lot I'm also going to be breaking down from there too. And then, of course, MLB trade deadline has also been really, really interesting. Lots and lots of different moves. So I want to start with something because so Friday night show, just before that it ended, Jordan Love ended up getting his contract extension, and good for him. Jordan Love, as I've said, the Green Bay Packers have always been such a patient franchise. They are not the kind of franchise that's desperate when it comes to quarterbacks, desperate at defense, desperate at offensive weapons, and also offensive line. They find them wherever that they can get their hands on, whether it's the draft, whether it's free agency. Usually Green Bay is not always a free agent friendly destination for some people because it is a small town type of it's a small town type franchise. That's just usually the case scenario. But the only thing is what they've barely missed on is quarterbacks. They've barely missed at quarterbacks, but it's funny because there's barely been any quarterback changes since Brett Favre came into the league. So once Brett came in, they were locked in at quarterback for a long time. And then they decided, hey, we're going to go and draft this kid from NorCal named Aaron Rodgers. And he sat behind him for a number of years until the time was right. Brett Favre basically got a little bit more prickly. He got a little bit more sensitive. And that was where he flirted with the idea of basically retiring, but then instead ends up going to the New York Jets. And we all know, too, what all happened afterward. And then that was where he ended up going to the Minnesota Vikings, staying in the North, but in different colors. So, and then Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy, and company all end up going into the Super Bowl, and they win one Super Bowl. One. And in the end, as years kind of move on by, Aaron Rodgers starts to become a little bit more like he's self-reflecting. He's more about ayahuasca. He's more about, really strengthening his personal aura and all the rest of this stuff. And so it just kind of seems like Aaron Rodgers was just too out there. But Aaron was very productive. And even when, a lot of this stuff where injuries started to pile up, he was still productive at quarterback. The offense would still be able to produce through him. But they made the idea that because of Aaron's, his uncertainty of what his future would basically be shaped like, they thought, hey, let's go draft a quarterback. And so when the 2020 draft class of quarterbacks, it was a lot of them. You had Justin Herbert, you had Jordan Love, you had Tua, you had Joe Burrow, and you had Jalen Hurts. 5 quarterbacks, all of them got paid. But when Jordan Love came into the league, I would argue, I think that if he came in his junior year at Utah State, his stocks probably would have been a lot higher. But that was not the case. So He kind of had a little bit of an okay year at Utah State. Usually, not a lot of people kind of pay attention to a lot of those quarterbacks there, but he was one that was deemed very special, very productive, and interesting to say the least. So, the Green Bay Packers and Brian Gutekunst basically not panicking, not in desperation mode, not in any way, shape, or form that they feel like we've got to get a quarterback. No, they've had one. Aaron Rodgers, still productive, still can throw the ball, still is managing to be productive. And then in comes Jordan Love, who they traded up into the first round and they picked a quarterback. And you better believe Aaron didn't like that. Of course not. Neither did Brett Favre when they chose Aaron Rodgers. So history always has a way of repeating itself. Now, of course, Aaron Rodgers, just like Brett Favre, he's on the Jets. And hopefully the Jets actually have a productive season. But the point is that they are not desperate with a lot of their components on either side of the ball. They're not desperate at quarterback. They are not desperate with their offensive weapons, let alone their offensive line. And they are not that desperate when it comes to their defensive components, whether it's secondary or linebackers or even the defensive front. They always tend to find guys that mesh and that become very productive. Now, like I said before, it's not a free agent destination type of place. We know that. Anybody that wants to play in a small town, yeah, it's hard. It's very, very hard. But in the end, Green Bay found their franchise quarterback in Jordan Love because two of them, Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, were deemed very prickly. You know, like there was always a loud noise in the room. With Jordan Love, I'm getting focused. I'm getting a kid with raw talent, but is only going to get better as his skills shapens up. But it seems to work with Matt LaFleur. It really does. At the end of the day, Jordan Love is now the highest paid quarterback in the league next to Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow. And a lot of you that I think are not very comfortable with that idea because we've only seen Jordan Love in a mixture of games, but he has played enough games to the point where we know what he is as a franchise quarterback. We know exactly how productive that he is. First 2 months was a very rocky start. But then by the time that after that second month, he went on a tear all the way down until you got into the playoffs and you absolutely annihilated and embarrassed Dallas. So there's something to really be interested in when it comes to Jordan Love. I know not a lot of people can believe it or could even kind of sit with that idea on the inside, but this is what it is. And the quarterback market, as I've said before, the quarterback market has changed. Lots and lots of quarterbacks now are starting to get paid the big bucks. I would argue that many people who believe that Patrick Mahomes is underpaid, I would say, in what world is he? He's got his money. Oh, and by the way, did you guys forget that he had a 10-year contract where he was getting paid $50 million a year? Yeah, and the only reason he has agreed to contract restructures is very simple and just like Tom Brady. He wants a better team. He wants a better offensive line to protect him, and he also wants weapons. Now, luckily, of course, Travis Kelce is usually always open at the right time, but sometimes you got to give me a little bit more weapons too. So in the end, Patrick Mahomes is playing this thing smart. He's not underpaid. Even if people look at him this way, he still manages to get into Super Bowls. But the case in point is Jordan Love is, in fact, the real deal in Green Bay. I know not a lot of people believe in that or they think it's too soon. I understand. You know, can't complain with that at all. Everybody's entitled to their opinions. I'm not going to end up, having to sway. I'm not going to have you sway yourselves into believing the idea that he is the real deal. Like he is going to end up, getting a Super Bowl. Maybe he end up, stealing the bag and all the rest of this stuff. I'm not going to sway you to believe it. But what I could tell you is that the market has changed. Receivers are getting paid differently. Quarterbacks are getting paid differently. And that's the bottom line. So you just kind of have to deal with it. I've talked with multiple people. Some are kind of, on the wit's end, like they kind of believe it. They kind of don't believe it. Go ahead and believe what you want. Everybody's entitled to their opinions. I'm okay with that. But I just think Jordan Love, if we have another amazing year out of him, I think you can make the case that Jordan Love belongs here. There's no question about it. And I think for many people's sake, I think it's kind of about right. So, interesting stuff. Oh, and by the way, voted by players, and in his first year in the NFL Top 100, Jordan Love is ranked 34th. So what does that tell you from players? It's telling you that apparently, because of injuries, some may not end up being sold on Burrow and Herbert. But we know that productively it was different. People kind of view Jordan Love a little different. That's fine too. And remember, these are voted upon by the players. Okay, it's not voted by me, not voted by any of the sports writers, even though that I think we would have a different argument if that were ever the case. But yeah, people seem to think that Jordan Love is in fact the real deal. And you could see this from the NFL players who are doing the top 100. This is what it is. So I just say times are changing. This is kind of the direction, and this is kind of where we're going right now as a league. So I just say deal with it. So, but Jordan Love, I do feel is very productive. I know that without a doubt, and I feel like, and to many extents, I think this will be interesting. I truthfully do think it'll be like it's going to get as interesting as it's going to get. I mean, that's just kind of the case here. So, and eventually, and this is what's funny because this also leads to Dak, is that I think we will eventually have our first $60 million a year quarterback, whether that be, if Mahomes is asking for another pay raise, if that's the case, or I think you can make the argument that if he ends up having an amazing year again and further and beyond, I think you can make the case for CJ Stroud. I mean, I think it's as good as it's going to get. But make no mistake, when you have your franchise quarterback, teams are going to want to pay these quarterbacks because they hold a very valuable spot in their offense. It's what helps them to produce. It's what helps them to keep them up in games. And who knows? This might translate where we might actually see some big game W's. Usually, that's kind of the case that happens. So, I mean, think about it. I think, interestingly enough, you can make that case that this could very much be the interesting thought on Jordan Love and for many future quarterbacks out there. Now, this next year's draft is not going to be as great. So, I mean, think about it. Not a great draft this upcoming draft. We may only have like 3 or 4 quarterbacks that are ready to play now, but we're kind of leaving the door open and kind of evaluating and seeing what we can get. So, I think it's interesting. Good stuff. But again, I think that, the quarterback market really has changed up a lot of how we see the game these days, but I think you can kind of make that case. Coming up next here after the break, now with all these quarterbacks that are now paid, the only quarterback not yet paid is Dak Prescott. Got a few things that I have to basically break down when it comes to here, because what will Dak Prescott mean as far as if he does get the payday bag, or he may end up testing the market and who ends up picking him up. And he may be the only standing quarterback that I'm sure teams would probably end up having to scope out. That coming up next. All right, folks. Well, the Olympics have been amazing. And also, football is back. With training camp and with so much more going on, really excited for what BetUS has to offer. From prop bets, straight parlay leg bets, and so much more to keep you in the action for the up-and-coming NFL season. Trade deadline in Major League Baseball. Who's got the edge to getting into the postseason? All of that as well. When you go online to BetUS.com, when you end up signing up today, $50 or more into your deposit, BetUS will gift you 200% in bonuses and also 30 risk-free bets when you join. It's exciting stuff, and it is certainly a fun time to definitely get ready for the up-and-coming NFL season. And, I'm excited for our trying predictions, because I know these are super, super stacked. So I cannot end up waiting for this up-and-coming season. We do it every year. It's a fun time, and it gets a chance to helping bettors like you up out there get on the edge of your game. Gambling problem, call the number in your respective state and seek help immediately. And make sure that you gamble responsibly. Do not gamble recklessly. Have fun, gamble responsibly, and get on the edge of your game here when you sign up at BetUS.com. BetUS, where the game begins.
Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action.
Looking for a show with the best takes and opinions? Want a show with the best coverage around the world of sports? Jam-packed with an all-star interview lineup? Then the best place to find it all, sports and entertainment, is right here. Join Jake Silva on the Snake Sports Talk Show, presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. Weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Snake Sports Talk Show is sponsored by Muscle Tech, with hundreds of supplements and vitamins to choose from, all packed with 100% all-natural proven ingredients. You can be sure that Muscle Tech will give you the edge and the boost to train and look like your fit and healthy best, whatever your goals are. Try Muscle Tech today and use promo code SNAKESPORTS to save 30% off your purchases.
Check out the Con Man live on the Sports Corner, coming to a screen near you, giving you the greatest stories from basketball legends you've never seen before. sharing their glory, building the toughness, and how they show off their swag. But only one man knows all that, and that's the Con Man. Join Michael Conceição, the Con Man, at the Sports Corner, Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific on Sportsway Network.
I was thinking about this, earlier and even in the last couple of days when I had to basically digest what the quarterback market and all the other teams, what this is basically meaning for them. Because it's interesting to say, because a lot of these quarterbacks, like I love a lot of them. And I do think that there are some quarterbacks that kind of, to an extent, kind of questions me. But I do think there's a part in it that, like, to many, I would say, like, again, franchise quarterbacks, and usually what they mean to their franchises. It's usually always dependent on your franchise, like, what's your culture set? Like, what's your culture kind of standing out? The other thing is, what's your coach like? Is he more, aggressive? Is he innovative? Is he somebody that's kind of more of an open book? Or is he somebody that's much more closed-minded, maybe more of like a defensive coach, and sometimes is always kind of set in one way? There's not really like, multiple points, like especially when you have multiple shapes, multiple spots. I've always told myself when it comes to life, I love to be multidimensional, because to be like one dimension, like that's it. That's the direction that you're going in. I'd rather be multidimensional because at the same time, it keeps me up to date with, with past histories, current situations, and future outcomes to be prepared for. So almost every quarterback now in this league has been paid except for Dak Prescott. So Dak now is waiting for a contract. Now, again, I love Dak, and I think Dak is very productive, and I also do think that he is a very, very smart-minded quarterback, always says the right things at the podium, and is like he's a player's kind of guy. Always says the right things. You never, ever have to question so much about what Dak is or who Dak is. So I'll make this case for Dak Prescott because I know a lot of people believe the 31-year-old fourth-round quarterback, he's not exactly a $60 million a year type guy. But let's look at over the years and in the stats that we've had with Dak Prescott over the years. And I actually do find this very fascinating because there's just so much to really kind of see under Dak's production and what he's really meant to this organization. So as you look from here on the production level, and what this is strictly telling you is Dak over the last few years. So we're going from 2019 all the way to 23. Dak has thrown for like almost 5,000 yards in 2019. And he's had 30 touchdowns and 11 picks. Okay. And the year in 2020, when he went down with that gruesome injury, remember how that ended up looking? Yeah, that was gruesome. Had that ankle injury, and he was out for the rest of the season. So in came Andy Dalton and another backup quarterback, but managed to at least throw almost 2,000 yards, completed 68% of his throws, and had 9 touchdowns, 4 picks. With a rating of 99.6. In 21, this was about the year that Mike McCarthy was getting Dak Prescott back from injury. And listen to this. Dak was completing 68% of his throws, almost 69. Fourth, almost over 4,500 yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and a rating of 104.2. So Dak's numbers increased. And this was post the injury because he was at 30 touchdowns the year before and ended up throwing 37 the year after. in 2022, which was an interesting year. He had 66% completion, 2,800, almost 3,000 yards passing, 23 touchdowns, 15 picks. Now, the picks didn't end up going up, but had a rating of 91.1. And then this season, he threw for 4,500 yards, had a completion percentage of at least 70, 36 touchdowns, 9 picks, and a rating of 105. This idea of Dak Prescott and what his value and what he basically means to this Cowboys group. Now, Jerry Jones spoke upon this, and people, there was a survey that was basically done by the NFL. And what it was basically trying to predict what every franchise's fan base, how real are they? Do they agree? And, what's the deal? And so you would be shocked when people said that the most honest franchise fan base in the NFL just so happened to be the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are very, very understanding and real of their team, and they also know what the circumstances and what the outcomes are going to be if things end up going south, especially when you're trying to end up paying Dak, you're trying to pay CeeDee Lamb, you're trying to pay Micah Parsons. It's not that simple and easy. And do I think Dak is worth $60 million a year? I don't think so. The only reason and the argument that I will say about Dak, and we've just read you the stats. We know Dak can be very productive. And if you think about it, he's already almost thrown for over 30,000 passing yards in the span of at least 8 years in his career. So he's definitely accomplished a lot. But the only thing that he has not yet accomplished, which is kind of the thing that hangs over the head of Dak, is an NFC championship appearance, possibly a Super Bowl appearance. But a lot of that is kind of more condemned towards Jerry Jones and the Jones family. And sometimes, too, a little bit of Mike McCarthy. But the funny thing is, and this is why it's so hard to really kind of predict the Cowboys, and more importantly, you're trying to basically look at how the Cowboys really produce, and can the Cowboys really end up making an NFC championship, or can they basically make the Super Bowl? Lots of Cowboy fans, there are some of them who just love to throw the pom-poms up, and for some, it's different. They're very real about their team. And if you actually think about this with his coaching career, let's look at Mike McCarthy. In the regular season, he's had 167 wins, 102 losses, and 2 ties. Has a percentage of .620. But in the postseason, he is 500, 11-11 in the postseason. That's with Brett Favre. That's with Aaron Rodgers. And here we are with Dak Prescott. I do not think Mike McCarthy, in any way, shape, or form, do I think he is an outrageously terrible head coach. We know Mike McCarthy, and what Jerry Jones likes is he likes yes men. He wants guys that basically agree to a lot of Jerry Jones' standpoint. So I think this is an interesting situation nonetheless. I spoke about this Friday and asked Anthony Armstrong about, the CeeDee Lamb situation with the contract. And even he agrees, and I agree with it too. You got to pay CD because he is a part of your offense that gets you downfield, moves the chains, and at least keeps the Cowboys in a lot of close game matchups. The only thing that I knock about the Cowboys is they do not have a number 2 receiver, at least a capable one. I think the running back room is a little bit wonky here because they bring back Zeke, and you've got Deuce Vaughn and a couple others. I'm not exactly sure I'm confident in this running back room. Maybe they might be looking at a kid, maybe at Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon. Maybe they might actually look at this kid. But nevertheless, it's a hard situation because you got to pay CD, you got to pay Dak, and you got to pay Micah. And you pay Dak, you almost have no chance, no shot at basically signing any other free agents. You probably would end up having to work on the draft, but it also depends where your draft spot is. Because sometimes there are teams that could win games, but they're more importantly about getting themselves in the right drafting spot. Because there are plenty of, there's plenty of options that's out there. I mean, I've had no doubt in my mind that there has never been any other options out there and when it comes to the draft. Now, I don't think the draft is really that attractive when it comes to the quarterbacks. I think wide receivers we would be fine with. Defensive linemen, defensive like edge rushers, I think could definitely have their stocks coming up because there are a couple of there's a couple options and a couple prospects that are out there in college that you can make the argument could be very, very good. But the Cowboys have an interesting season, and it's mostly an important season to say because Philadelphia, they upgraded their running back room, getting Saquon Barkley, and they've also ended up upgrading their corners and their safeties because that's the position that they got beat in. Washington, new coach, new culture, new quarterback, new GM. There's everything that you could like about this. But again, many people that I have spoken to and what I have thought about, what's interesting about it is there's almost just this kind of funny feeling that you're hoping that this turns out right. This turns out good. But I'm sorry to say, it's hard for me to really kind of think about that because of the cost and value of those three position guys I explained about. I don't know exactly how you do it. I don't know what it is you got to do in order to make this right. But I'm telling you right now, Dak is not going to settle for less than $60 million. Because after you just saw Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, and Joe Burrow, they got the bag. Tua ended up getting the bag and getting $53 million. I'll talk about that in a bit. But he's not settling for less. Neither is CeeDee Lamb after he's putting arguably asymmetrical numbers just like Justin Jefferson. So you're not going to end up lowballing him. And then at the same time, Micah Parsons is your defense. He's your hybrid player. He's hyper aggressive. He's fun to watch. And he's a guy that basically in a lot of these areas, like you can't help but love. You can't help but just love the type of athlete, the type of player he is. I do think in some degrees, whenever I listen to his podcast, I think that Micah can sound a little delusional. But let's be honest here. I think Micah, to certain extents, he's a very productive player. As long as he's in the right spots and as long as he ends up producing in his position, the Cowboys have a viable defense. But does this offense move without Dak? Remember, they had Cooper Rush as their quarterback, bridge guy. He's obviously not a certified franchise quarterback. In my opinion, I think he's a very quality backup than anything else. But you could win games without Dak. It's been proven. And Mike McCarthy's been in this position before. When Dak went down with the injury, he had Andy Dalton and he had Cooper Rush. Those were his two quarterbacks. And he was productive with both. Now, the wins did not end up translating, but I don't think that really kind of mattered in that kind of year. But either way, both quarterbacks showed they were productive. So you got to make a serious decision from here. But I don't think that they would be in any way, shape, or form. If you're trying to get another offensive receiver, which I think you can address in the draft, if you're trying to basically keep your defense like intact in multiple ways, and not to mention too, they just drafted another offensive lineman. So there's options that they would like to fill. And you know what? I'm fine with that. But in the end, whomever becomes quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, just know there's pressure on your shoulders from the ownership. There's pressure on your shoulders from the coaching staff. And you cannot afford to underachieve in this franchise. Like that is not in their DNA. So that's one of the things that's interesting to see about how this organization and how this team will produce. I don't know if it's really going to make a significant difference, but I'll make the argument that I think that the Cowboys, we have seen them with Dak, but we've also seen them when Dak is sidelined. I think anything's possible, but I think if the Cowboys really play this out right, maybe, just maybe, you might have a chance to still be a viable franchise getting into the playoffs. And if the wins translated right too, because they were 12-5 in 2 consecutive seasons, if that becomes the case again, that is where maybe it's not really all about Dak. But we know Dak is very smart. He's very productive. And any other teams that would look for him in the market, because if Dak gets a contract like this very moment, then the quarterback market coming into next year is very thin. So there's not going to be a whole lot of options. But if Dak doesn't, Dak will be the number one option because he's productive, he's smart at the podium, and he's got a great football IQ. So that's one of the things that you can argue is what makes Dak's value even more worth it for a couple of other teams if it doesn't pan out with the Cowboys. Time now here for the news.
This is the Hot Press.
All right, so been keeping up with the Olympics lately, and I've been really fascinated to kind of see exactly right now in the Olympics because the USA right now, they are holding right now 26 medals, and right now we're in the lead with 11 silver and bronze medals right now, but are not quite in that lead of gold at this point yet. But I mean, we've been very, very competitive in the last few matchups. Simone Biles has been absolutely amazing, and we've had multiple athletes that have been coming in and they've been looking great. So, by the way, Major League Baseball trade deadline is coming up here, but a lot of trades getting done the day before the trade deadline. And here's what we've got to show for you. So, first of all, the LA Dodgers right now, we know that they are definitely loading up their roster with anything that they can get. So the LA Dodgers made a couple of major moves to upgrade their rotation, and they ended up acquiring right-hander Jack Flaherty from the Detroit Tigers. They've also reached up a deal where they have acquired outfielder Kevin Kiermaier, sending Ryan Yarbrough into that deal with Toronto. But Flaherty deal, they sent catcher Tehran Liranzo and Trey Sweeney, both minor leaguers, to Detroit, completing the deal. So Flaherty, he's on a 1-year contract. So this is kind of seeming like it's a 1-year rental, $14 million on the contract. He's been very, very productive. 7 wins, 5 losses, 2.95 ERA with 133 strikeouts and at least just 19 walks in 106 in the third innings he's pitched. So Dodgers are bolstering the the starting rotation. And it's very obvious that the Dodgers are going to be, the NL West champions. I have no doubt about that. I think it was very clear from the beginning. But them landing at least a utility outfielder out there, and Kevin Kiermaier, he's faced off against this Dodgers roster. So he knows what this is. So, and even in his brief stint with Tampa Bay. So he understands the winning culture that is in this franchise. And so there's no question in my mind that I think that Jack Flaherty and Kevin Kiermaier, these were some very, very good pickups for the Dodgers, at least some that people can agree could very much make a change with this organization because they needed some pitching help. So they get some. All right, interesting here because the White Sox, they basically have been on a fire sale. The White Sox right now are just in an absolute slump right now and just really, really bad. They've already gotten 15 consecutive losses, not to mention they only have 27 wins right now in this regular season. And so you already know this franchise is a laughingstock. But I didn't think this might happen, but apparently the White Sox, they have dealt away, and I think he's been kind of, a franchise disappointment, but they dealt away outfielder Eloy Jimenez to the Baltimore Orioles for left-hander Trey Mageau. The 27-year-old, he was batting .245 home runs and 16 RBIs this season. What a letdown. He was limited to 65 games because of an adductor and hamstring issues after reaching double figures in homers each of his first 5 seasons. So it has not been quite a fun scenario at all. And, sometimes with a lot of these players, change of scenery is always a good thing. So Eloy Jimenez out of Chicago into Baltimore. They're not that desperate when it comes to power bats or utility players, at least having some availability that's there. So I think this is a pretty good pickup in my opinion. Interesting to kind of see this. So let's get into the NFL now. So we were talking a little bit about the Bears. I'm going to talk more about this because the Bears and Texans, they play the Hall of Fame game on Thursday. Football would be officially back by that point. So the Chicago Bears, Ryan Poles, multiple others, they've been doing a lot of work. They've been getting a lot of offensive players in the building. They drafted the obvious number 1 pick, Caleb Williams. And so they reward one of their offensive players, and that's wide receiver DJ Moore. So the Chicago Bears and DJ Moore ended up agreeing to a 4-year, $110 million contract. That's the largest in franchise history with their position at wide receiver. The deal that was negotiated by Drew Rosenhaus, Jason Rosenhaus, and Robert Bailey, that includes an $82.6 million guarantee, which ranks 3rd for a wide receiver on a single contract in history. So you saw Justin Jefferson, he got the $110 million guaranteed, and A.J. Brown, $84 million. So all 3 players agreed to their deal this offseason. 27-year-old, he's been great since the Bears acquired DJ Moore. And yes, they did have to trade up a lot of their picks to going and getting a really good wide receiver. But at the very least, when I'm waiting to see how this works with Caleb Williams, but I think DJ Moore, he's definitely been deserving of this. This first season with the Bears, he put up a career year. Had 96 catches, 1,300 yards, and 8 touchdowns, and he also accounted for over only 40% of Chicago's receiving yards, the highest percentage for any player or a team in 2023. So whether they have, Justin Fields or Tyson Bagent, and maybe we might end up seeing this connection with Caleb Williams, but interestingly enough, I think this works out perfectly for the Bears. So good for DJ Moore. And I think because he has stood as the lone wide receiver in this organization because, I can only name at least a couple wide receivers they've had over the past. They've had Bernard Berrien. They've had Musa Muhammad. They've had Johnny Knox. They've had Alshon Jeffrey. They've had Allen Robinson. They've had multiple receivers, but none of whom are putting up the productive numbers than what DJ Moore has already done. So I think this was a good move, and I think Chicago is finally starting to open up, starting to see what this now starting to look like with an offensive type mindset now. This is interesting, but I like it. I like it. All right, that was the news.
This is the Hot Press.
So, of course, football is officially back. And again, we've all have been waiting for it for a long time. But one of my things that I would be talking about is because Thursday night is the Hall of Fame game. Chicago versus Houston. Now, it was just pointed out earlier that Chicago would not, and I repeat, would not be playing Caleb Williams. Now, isn't this interesting? So I just talked about the DJ Moore extension, but this is worth talking about. I just think this is kind of interesting here. So here was the report. So Courtney Cronin, who ESPN writer, basically talked about Caleb Williams will have to wait another week to make his NFL debut. So the rookie quarterback and other starters will not play in Thursday's Hall of Fame game, Coach Matt Eberflus ended up announcing. And that means that second-year quarterback Tyson Bagent will make the start against the Texans. They've also concluded its 9th practice of training camp today, and will hold a split session tomorrow going before departing for Canton, Ohio. And players who are expected to play against the Texans will go through a walkthrough while primary starters are on a different field. So what does this mean now with, Caleb Williams not playing in this Thursday night game? Well, you know what? To me, it's preseason. I don't give a rip. It's different if you don't have Caleb Williams starting in week 1, which I sincerely doubt that will ever happen. I don't think that that's necessarily a situation that Matt Eberflus is ready to really kind of face that kind of pushback. But Caleb Williams is very, very productive. And what I've been hearing from camp, the guy is incredible. Caleb Williams, like he's throwing unbelievable stuff. And I've been hearing, all other quarterbacks that have been really, really good since they've been drafted. But Caleb Williams, what you're getting from him. You're getting spectacular. You're getting a guy through Lincoln Riley's system, much like Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray. Caleb, through this system, is very hyper offense. And he's thrown 93 touchdowns in college in 2 years. And even with a crazy USC program, which I'm not sure exactly how that's going to be how that's going to pan out. But Caleb Williams, I'm not even going to react to it. What's the point? It's preseason. Who cares? My thing with, Caleb Williams, he's very hyper athletic. He's unbelievable, of course, as a thrower. And he's somebody that I think, I would not lean so solely into the spectacular. But the case I have is that I just feel like that the Bears now and Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles, they all understand the kind of quarterback they finally have. You would not be feeling like this with Justin Fields. Justin Fields would be there in Canton, Ohio on Thursday. Okay, that's not the case in point here with Caleb Williams. And he will play in a preseason. Maybe it might not just be this one. But nevertheless, Caleb Williams is in fact going to be a rising star. From what we're told up in camp and what we're told up in practice, the guy throws a beautiful ball. The other thing is, too, receivers are really starting to kind of connect the relationship. And again, this could be something that's happening in camp. And that normally always happens. Everybody gets, positive notes. Like you hear about what's going on with the Chargers and with their culture, with Jim Harbaugh, everybody's all bought in. Oh, and by the way, the Pittsburgh Steelers with Russell Wilson, we haven't seen much of Russell, at least developing and connecting very quickly with his peers. And they've already had Justin Fields in the first offense. He's already been taking reps from there. And we've had video footage and video proof where you saw him throw this beautiful 60-yard bomb, and it was pretty impressive. But again, anybody could basically show off in camp. It doesn't matter to me. Ultimately, what matters is what's going to happen when you're on the field. So I'm not reacting to this, to Caleb Williams. I think the kid is great. I think he's phenomenal. He's definitely up there as the top 5 players that could potentially be offensive rookies of the year. But I think Chicago's finally getting it through their head of what they know they have and what they finally know what he's capable of and what he can do. Good for Chicago. We've been waiting for this now for years. And I've got really good friends of mine that have been Chicago Bears fans from the very, very beginning. And it has been incredible. It has been right now a fun kind of journey right now with what we're seeing with Caleb Williams. So I can't wait until he finally gets the snaps and we get a chance to see him play in action. So speaking of the Pittsburgh Steelers, so a crushing blow ended up happening in camp as one of their, I believe he was a third round wide receiver, and loved him in Michigan. I thought he was absolutely clutch and he was incredible. Wide receiver Roman Wilson was carted off the field in practice. So the question now remains, because the Brandon Ayuk situation is still kind of large. There's still an opportunity and there's still a chance. There's a good chance that there might end up being some sort of trade at some point. But I know San Francisco, they'll get a deal done, and I think it'll be fun to watch. But Pittsburgh, like we said, they were the forefront runners to acquire a guy like Brandon Ayuk. Would that be the case? No one quite knows yet. But it's very possible that he could be. So Roman Wilson was carted off the field. We haven't had any news just yet of his injury and what the severity may be here. But, however, the Steelers, I've never doubted, at least with their receivers. Never have. But this is a time I think you might want to consider a phone call if you are Pittsburgh. I know. And everybody's kind of talking about this whole thing as if we are not paying attention to this situation and this scenario right now. But again, Brandon Ayuk, he's looking for a contract. And Pittsburgh, the only thing they have not been able to figure out is offensive line, since Mike Tomlin has been there now the last few years. So we have not been able to see this yet. So, and again, Russell Wilson, there's been question marks on him. Not entirely sure how that right now is going to end up, really meshing and pulling themselves together. But I'll make an argument that I think Justin Fields, and for people that think he's meant to be a kick returner, stop. Stop with this whole nonsense. That's not happening. I sincerely doubt you would put a guy like Justin Fields at kick return. Seriously doubt it. After you just saw that throw and what you're seeing right now, and here's what's funny. Justin Fields actually has a chance. He has a good chance of actually connecting and bonding with his peers. He's got a great chance. And the more and more he continues to show in camp and what his abilities can do, at the same time, there's all kinds of different outlooks you could look at right now with the Steelers. But I think after losing their wide receiver, I'd be considering making a phone call. I seriously would. I'm not doubting that at all in my mind, because this is not a scenario and situation. And like I said from the very beginning, when they got Russell Wilson, you do not want to be mediocre at quarterback. You really, really do not want to do that. Because the truth is because look at that AFC North. That AFC North is filled with everything. I'm filled with offense. I'm filled with quarterbacks. I've got defensive edge rushers. I got it all. And it's going to be a complete bloodbath, to say the least, in this division more than anything. It's really, really interesting, though. But again, I just think that if you are smart enough, if you are Pittsburgh right now, and usually I don't get this concerned about Pittsburgh at all. I don't. I've always kind of trusted Pittsburgh with their offensive weapons. But at this point right now, I'm kind of a little bit worried there, bud. Not gonna lie. I'm kind of worried about it. But again, you can have at least, some optimism and all the rest of it there, but I don't think optimism, at least in this franchise and in this organization, with what you're going into, in the middle of where we are at right now, that's something I would be I'd be very close with this. I would not be flirting with this idea thinking, we'll be okay. We're not in any way, shape, or form feeling like we got to be desperate. There's a difference between being desperate, but also being aware. Yeah, because this, if you have not been able to develop, this connection, this chemistry with this team, kind of gets a little bit hard here. It really does. So I'm just saying, Pittsburgh, think about it. And, because again, this is not going to last very, very long, not in this scenario. So I just think right now, I'd be keeping my eyes open. I really, really would. I think there's a good chance that if something were to be wrong, because right now you are only leaning on George Pickens, and I like George Pickens, but Pickens should not only be the sole piece of your offense. You got to at least acquire more. So if you got to put this deal up in place, sometimes you got to make sacrifices. But Pittsburgh, they need an offensive line. They need a wide receiver now at this point. So let's make a deal. And I think that's something that you could strongly consider for all purposes. So keep an eye out for Pittsburgh on this one, because I don't think you can walk in with sheer confidence feeling like this is the way. I would consider potentially getting a weapon to save your behinds. That's what I personally would probably look at. I love Roman Wilson, but if he's out and you ain't got no other options, you already lost Deontay Johnson, you've already lost at least a couple pieces, I'd strongly would be considering it. All right, folks, that's going to do it here for the show. Appreciate all of you guys for jumping on here and hanging out with me tonight. We got a lot covered on. We talked about Jordan Love, talked about the Steelers and the Chicago Bears, because Thursday night's about to be a fun one with football being back. We know it's a Hall of Fame game, and we know it's preseason, but you know what? I'll get a chance to basically see some reps, see the new look Texans, and how we're going to really pan this out if this is a team that can get over the top. Appreciate all of you guys for being on here and hanging out with me tonight. Show sponsored by BetUS. When you put in $50 or more into your deposit, 200% bonuses and 30 risk-free bets when you join in. And by using the code in the description as well, get yourself signed up. Let them know Jake the Snake sent you. And shout out to our partners, of course, for the free copy of College Football 25. I cannot wait to play it. Lots of fun stuff. But check them all out for yourself. BetUS, where the game begins. Absolutely love our partners there. Also by SeatGeek. Do not lose your seat today, especially if you're going down there to Canton, Ohio for the Hall of Fame game. Best seats in the house. In your next sporting event, your next concert with your favorite artist, or more of your favorite kind of entertainment. SeatGeek has you covered on all of that by using promo code SNAKESPORTS to get $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket, just by a simple thank you from all of us, and by using one of the most trustworthy ticketing apps for your next event. Go on to SeatGeek.com and download it on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And do not forget to use promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off. Jake the Snake Silva signing off here, guys. Have a great rest of your evening. We'll see you tomorrow here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, guys.